What's up y'all, Jmaculate here. In today's video, I'll go over my process for creating a rhythm section on the Dirtywave M8. This includes shaping drum sounds using envelope, EQ, and some other effects, as well as some of the general sequencing tactics that I utilize. Alright, let's get to it. I usually start building my rhythm section with the snare. Once I've found a sample I like, I'll drop a few notes into the phrase to start the pattern. Like many drum samples from my collection, this one has some noise at the end that I want to silence and fade out. Instead of trimming the audio using the crop function from the sample edit page, you can get a more natural sound by using a volume envelope. The envelope controls are on the mod page, so to get there, go to the instrument page and then hold shift and press up. And then from here, change the destination to volume. And then here you can just lower the decay, which will control how long the sound plays out before it fades out entirely. Although just using the decay parameter by itself may start the fade out too quickly and take away some of the snare's presence. So you can add a short hold to keep the initial sound or transient active, and then the decay will kick in and start to fade the sound a little later. So to do that, you could just add a few values to the hold parameter. With the snare dialed in, I usually add a kick next. I'll follow the same steps with the kick and dial the envelope to a point that I like. After that, I generally use the EQ to shape the sound. My favorite configuration is to keep the lows on low shelf and crank up the gain to something like 5 or 7. And then I keep the mids on bell and I drop the mids super low, something like -10. After that, I change the highs to a high cut that I leave at 0, and then I move the frequency around until I just get a light amount of high end coming through. And next up, I'll choose a hi-hat. I usually use the quick fill shortcut to get a bunch of notes in the phrase, and then I start to shape the sound after that. To use the quick fill shortcut, highlight the column by holding shift and then pressing option twice. Then hold option and press left until you see the fill 2x configuration. And again, the envelope is a great place to start shaping the sound. And for the hi-hat specifically, I like to use the degrade parameter to get a nice bit crush effect, which can give the hat some lo-fi warmth. If it sounds too crunchy, you can also try combining degrade with a filter like band pass or low pass to make the aliasing or ringing sounds a little bit quieter. Now that I've got the basic building blocks for the rhythm section, I'll add microtiming using a special table configuration. For more info on how this works, check out my microtiming on the M8 video. I'll start with adding microtiming to the hi-hat. I usually start by pulling all the notes back, then I'll go through and pull the in-between notes like on step 2 and step 6 back a little bit further. And I'll lower the velocity of the in-between notes to create a more realistic sounding groove. And then I'll adjust the values of all the notes in the phrase to give it another layer of variability. Now I'll add microtiming to the kick. So for these ghost notes I've added in, I'll nudge them using the microtiming table configuration, and then I'll also lower their velocity to something like 44 or 54. I like to place as many notes as I can fit naturally into a single phrase. Now that I've got this phrase packed, I'm going to use the nth command to make it so that some of these notes will only trigger after the phrase has looped once, or will trigger once, then skip the next loop of the phrase. The first thing you'll need to do to set this up is make sure that you have multiple triggers of the phrase in the chain. So here I only have one, so I'm going to add one phrase so that it's a 2-bar loop. Now I'll add the nth command to the ghost notes that I want to trigger less frequently. Nth set to 1-0 will play on 2, which means that it will skip the first time the phrase plays in the chain, and then play it the second time the phrase plays. Another useful value for the nth command is 8-0. This will basically do the opposite of what we just set up. So instead of playing on 2, this will play on 1 and 3. Although this is just a 2-bar loop, so it'll ignore the part about the 3, and it'll just play the first time the phrase loops, and not on the second time. At this point, there are a few other things I consider adding. The first is an open hat, which can add some nice variety to the pattern. I want to make the hi-hat pattern 2 bars as well, but the nth trick isn't going to work on this one because I need to play a different instrument on one of the steps. So instead of using that command, what I'll do is clone the phrase that has the hi-hats on it by holding Shift, then pressing Option, and then pressing Edit. And so now I have the original phrase and a copy of the phrase. And I'll add the open hat to the copy. The timing, velocity, and other parameters of the open hat may not match the closed hat, so I want to dial those in by listening to the pattern loop and adjusting the values as I listen. One handy trick for looping segments of a phrase is to highlight the section you want to loop by holding Shift and then pressing Option, and then hold Shift and then press play. Now the sequence will jump back to the top of the selection once the playhead gets to the last note of the selection. Since I can hear the open hat triggering more frequently, I can easily adjust the parameters to get the sound and timing I want. The other element I consider adding is a percussion loop, like a shaker, tambourine, or rides. Sequencing these loops is very easy because you can use the start FX command to quickly chop the loop and sketch out a nice arrangement without needing to add slice markers. I like to add these commands to the quarter notes and just mess around with random values until I get something interesting going. And you can preview what the value of the STA command will sound like by just holding Edit and adjusting the value. I generally keep my percussion tracks separate, but if you're strapped for space in your arrangement, you can use the quick render feature to resample the drum section and then have all the sounds trigger on a single track. First, make sure the chains are all the same number of phrases. Here, all my chains are 2 phrases long. Next, highlight the chains from the song page, and then press Edit twice. From this menu, select Quick Render. Now you'll have an instrument with the entire rhythm section in a single sample, which you can then slice and sequence from a single track. So that's generally how I approach making beats on the M8. But if there's anything that you normally do when you're working on beats in the rhythm section, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments. And that does it for this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.